Welcome to science class. Today we are going to be discussing photosynthesis, the best and maybe worst thing that ever happened to the planet. What do I mean by that? Well, photosynthesis evolved on Earth at least 3.5 billion years ago, maybe much sooner. The oxygen that it produces was toxic to all life forms on Earth. The accumulation of oxygen in the oceans and atmosphere very likely caused more widespread extinction than any event in Earth's history, more so than the Cretaceous extinction, more so than the Permian extinction. Life was completely unicellular, so we are talking about the extinction of bacteria, and it's easy to say, yeah, well, who cares? Well, the bacteria that causes meningitis doesn't care if it kills you. Good luck convincing bacteria that it should care about you. However, without free oxygen in the air, complex multicellular life would probably have never evolved on Earth. I did a video on the geologic timeline of Earth's history, and I went as far as to say that photosynthesis is the most significant event that has ever happened on Earth. Link to that video in the description. It's not just the oxygen that photosynthesis produces, it's also where all of the food on Earth comes from. All of it, for every organism. Well, except for chemosynthetic archaea that live amongst hydrothermal vents, but just pretend you don't know about those, okay? Let's get started. So I don't make these videos for you to take notes on and teach you everything you need to know. That would take way too long and it would be extremely boring. Photosynthesis is a process, and as long as you can understand the process of how each molecule is used and what it transforms into, then that is more than satisfactory. Photosynthesis is extremely complicated. Just look at this diagram. Many teachers expect students to memorize everything on here, such as ribulose 1,5-biphosphate carboxylase oxygenase. Knowing things is not the same as intelligence. Some people have a condition that allows them to remember everything they've ever heard, seen, or read, but these people aren't geniuses or running the world. People that win on Jeopardy are not scientists or engineers typically. People get turned away from science because of this outdated and worthless idea of memorizing facts, and I don't want to contribute to it. Getting back to the lesson. It's not just plants that do photosynthesis. Algae and cyanobacteria and some protists carry it out as well. We will be focusing on the kind of photosynthesis that occurs in most types of plants, but I'll try to mention some of the differences here and there. Regardless of the species, the overview of photosynthesis is the same. Organisms absorb water and carbon dioxide into their cells and borrow sunlight energy to break the water molecule apart, and then in a series of steps build carbohydrate molecules from the carbon dioxide, and oxygen is produced as a waste product. We are going to look at how each of those steps happens. Cells are mostly water. Unicellular photosynthetic organisms live in the water, while plants absorb it through their root systems, and then transport it around through a complex network of xylem and phloem cells. Carbon dioxide is in the air and dissolves into water. Plants absorb carbon dioxide through tiny pore openings called stomata. In other organisms, carbon dioxide simply diffuses into their tissues. Photosynthesis cannot occur without light, and photosynthesis occurs more or less in two main stages, the first of which is the light-dependent reaction. In simplest terms, what happens in the light-dependent reaction is that the water molecule is split and what are called electron carrier molecules are made. The oxygen from water is released. This is where the oxygen in the atmosphere comes from, the splitting of water. The hydrogen atoms are used by the organism in a clever but complicated way. In order to split the water molecule, energy must be used. Duh. This is really the only part of the whole photosynthesis process that requires sunlight. Sunlight energy is absorbed not by the water molecule directly, but by a pigment that all photosynthetic organisms contain called chlorophyll. Most plants also contain carotenoid pigments, which we only see during the autumn when plants begin to reabsorb the more common chlorophyll pigment. Cyanobacteria and red algae contain phycobilin pigment, which is why they are a different color entirely. These pigments absorb all wavelengths of the spectrum except a select few. The wavelengths they don't absorb are reflected, and that's what we see. Plants look green because they reflect or fail to absorb green light. Chlorophyll pigments are concentrated in the chloroplast organelle within the cells of leaves on plants. But where chlorophyll are really concentrated is in the membranes of these stacked structures called thylakoids. Bacteria, protists, and algae have chlorophyll embedded in their cell membrane. Remember, these are unicellular organisms with no organelles, therefore no chloroplast. It's about to get one step more complicated. Like the song Hole in the Bottom of the Sea, which ends with a fleck on the speck, on the tail, on the frog, on the bump, on the branch, on the log, in the hole in the bottom of the sea, there's one more thing here. Chlorophyll pigment is concentrated within a protein complex called a photosystem. There's a chlorophyll in the photosystem, in the thylakoid, in the chloroplast, in the cell of the plant. That's not very catchy, I know, but that is where the absorption of light energy takes place. This energy, as I stated previously, splits the water molecule. Oxygen, you're done. Goodbye, we have satisfied that part of the photosynthesis equation. The hydrogen atoms are actually split from their electrons. These electrons travel down the thylakoid membrane, down what's called the electron transport chain. Hydrogen ions, which are positively charged because they lost their electron, also build up on one side of the thylakoid membrane, but eventually they pass through due to massive differences in electrical potential energy. This biophotochemical electrical potential energy actually generates a small amount of ATP in the process. Nice. The electrons are energized a second time in a different photosystem, but eventually these electrons combine with a molecule called nicotine amide adenine dinucleotide phosphate, or just NADP+. That plus indicates that it has a positive charge. 2 electrons and 1 positively charged hydrogen atom, which we got from the water molecule, combine with NADP+ to create NADPH. The H stands for hydrogen, and this molecule is now neutrally charged after adding 2 negative particles and another positive particle. Remember, it started off with a positive charge. So why? Why make NADPH? Cells cannot directly build carbohydrates out of carbon dioxide, and that's not what the sunlight is used directly for either. Sunlight energy is stored by NADPH, and that molecule will be used to build the carbohydrates in the next major phase of photosynthesis, the Calvin cycle. You can think of this like burning coal to heat steam to drive a train. There are intermediate steps. So here's that scary picture again. Yeah, this is the Calvin cycle. I don't care about any of that. Here's what happens. Carbon dioxide enters the chloroplast organelle. Within the empty spaces, or stoma, of the chloroplast, it is combined with other compounds and made into starch and sucrose. Reactions that build large molecules from simpler ones are called anabolic reactions. These require energy. NADPH and some ATP is used to build the larger carbon molecules that the plant will later store as carbohydrate. NADPH is converted back to NADP+, and it'll just be recycled. And ATP is converted back to ADP and is also recycled. And that's it. That is how each molecule is transformed and what they turn into. Yes, I intentionally left a lot of stuff out. But nobody listens to a beautifully performed school concert and thinks, I bet these kids don't even know anything about music theory. The details aren't going to make you understand photosynthesis any better. If you can know this much, then you understand enough. Next time, we are going to look at how the rest of life on Earth, including plants actually, takes the products made from photosynthesis and uses it as their exclusive energy source. Food. We're going to talk about how your body uses food. Thanks for watching.